Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2022 Buick Encore GX ST, we're going to be showing you how to install the Blue Ox base plate kit with removable arms. But before we do that, let me check it out and make sure that this is a setup that's going to be right for you. So before we get too carried away talking about the base plate, I figured it would be useful just to kind of refresh yourselves on the main components that we're going to need to flat tow our Buick down the road in the first place. First one's going to be your base plate. That's going to provide us with a solid and reliable attachment point. That way we can hook our tow bar up to it. And the tow bar is going to be the physical link that actually connects the front of your Buick to the back of your motorhome. The third main component is going to be safety cables, and those are there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. Those are going to keep everything paired together. The fourth main component is going to be your tow bar wiring. And so that's going to be the wiring that transfers the lighting functions from the back of your motorhome to the back of your Buick, not only keeping you safe but legal as well. And last but not least, the fifth main component is going to be a supplemental braking system. And what that's going to do is apply the brakes in your SUV whenever you hit the brakes in your RV, and that's going to help bring you to a predictable and complete stop. So first things first, what a lot of people are probably going to wonder, I know it's something that I would wonder, is how the base plate's going to look on the front of the Buick. And honestly, it's not too bad. I mean, definitely you notice that there's an accessory there, but you know, with it being down low and it being you know, that flat black in color, it does do a decent job of just kind of blending in. You know, are you going to notice it? Yeah. Is it going to be like, holy cow, what happened to the front of my car? No, at least in my opinion. With that said though, as of right now, for those of you that have the GS model, unfortunately you only have one choice, and that is this base plate. There's none other available for it, so kind of have to work with what you got. There is other base plates available for the just kind of the standard GS model, or GX model rather, and those are going to look very similar as well, so not a ton of differences there. I have seen people being able to keep this part that runs along through here, but every vehicle is going to be set up a little bit different. You may or may not be able to do that. In our case, we did have to trim it to give us the clearance that we need. But like I said, you know, every circumstance is a little bit different. Everything fits just a little bit different on every vehicle. So that's something to keep in mind as well. There's a few things I do want to point out that, you know, I think was a good addition to the base plate and kind of well thought out. One of them being that we're going to have a couple brackets already attached to the base plate. So one for your breakaway switch and one for your wiring connector. Just gives you a good spot to mount everything, kind of helps simplify the installation. You're not trying to custom make a bracket or anything. With this one here, if you have your front license plate on, you are going to have to just kind of bend it down a little bit to give you the clearance that you need. Not a huge deal though. And even if we look over to where the caps go, they give you these caps, and you know, it might seem kind of silly, but honestly, when you're not using your base plate, you put them in there, and it's going to help keep your cylinder here in better condition, because this is where your arms are going to go in and out of. So if we can keep anything out of there to help keep it in better shape, it's definitely worthwhile in my opinion. Whenever you are ready to hook up to your motorhome, it's going to be easy, you know, and that's what's on a lot of people's minds. You know, you don't want something that you're going to have to fight with and be complicated. And with the removable arms, it makes it straightforward. You're going to pull your caps out, take the arm, slide it on in, and rotate it about a quarter turn until that pin locks into place. Same deal with the other side. And once these are in, you're ready to hook up your tow bar. So the base plate, these arms are going to work with Blue Ox tow bars, as well as some of the others. And for example, just right off the top of my head, let's say Roadmaster tow bars. some of their tow bars, they come with Blue Ox adapter ends. And if yours doesn't, chances are pretty good you can find an adapter end. That way you can put that different end on your tow bar and be able to hook up to your base plate. But other than that, at the end of the day, base plate you really can't go wrong with. You know, not only is it going to look pretty good, but it's going to be easy to use. So really couldn't ask for too much more. Now, as far as the installation goes, I'm not going to lie, it's somewhat involved. You know, you do have to remove the front fascia, which is really tight onto the vehicle. Got quite a few fasteners you need to get to. Nothing's really hard to get to. There's just quite a few of them, and it's just time consuming. You know, there's no other way around it. But as long as you stay focused, shouldn't really run into too many issues. And along the way, I'll show you how I did some things and a couple of pointers to hopefully speed that process up and avoid any snags you may run into. But with that said, why don't we go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the front of our Buick. You're going to pop the hood, and we're going to need to get our fascia removed. So first step in that is to remove 6 fasteners in total along this back edge here. So we're going to have 3 on each side. So here's our fasteners. We're going to be pulling out this one, and this one. Use a T15 Torx bit. Once I have these out, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And from this point on, anything we do to one side of the vehicle, we're going to do to the other side as well, because it'll be set up the same way. Now if you move to our front wheel well, along the front edge of the liner here, we're going to have 5 T15 Torx bit screws that run up along it. And so we'll go ahead, grab our bit, and get them pulled out. Chances are pretty good you're not going to have a tool like this one here, so what you can do when you're doing this to make it easier is actually turn your wheels one way or the other. That'll free up a lot of space, and you'll be able to get kind of your standard tool inside of there. Now if you look in front of our wheel well, we're going to have this trim piece right here, and we need to pull that out maybe about halfway up. That way we can get to some fasteners, or a fastener rather. So to get this off, what I like to do is just kind of grab it and just start to wiggle it, kind of try to work it loose, because this is just held in place by plastic fasteners, and if we're not careful we can break them. But it's kind of a finesse deal here. So what I like to do is some of them, you can actually get to the back side of them and pinch them to help pull them out. It's going to be hard to see while I'm doing this here, but once we get it out, I can show you what I was working with. So if you peel this back, you can feel in there. And try to get this thing worked out here. It's going to be tight, so you can expect that. So you can see that I got it started. This is what I was squeezing on. From the back side, if you kind of squeeze this in and pull out at the same time, that's when it'll pop out. So we're just going to carefully work our way up here. And we want to get it probably at about there. So once we have it about there, we have a light here. We're going to unplug that. You can push out on that red tab and push down on the connector tab there, pull it out. And then if we look right here, we're going to have a 7mm fastener. So we're going to carefully take our wrench, our ratchet, and pull that fastener out. Underneath our vehicle now, on each side of it, we're going to have 2 T15 Torx bit screws that we're going to pull out. We'll get that one out. as well as this one. So now here in the center of our car, along this edge, we're gonna have a total of 6 7mm head screws that we're gonna pull out. Now if we come to the corner here on the bottom side, you kind of pull this fender liner down. If we look up here, we're going to have 2 13mm head bolts that we need to remove. Now with the next set of hands, we can get our fascia removed. I do suggest putting some painter's tape around the edges here. That way if you nick it, you know, you're not gonna have to worry about scratching the paint or anything. But what you're gonna do is start from the corner and carefully just start to pop this out. And once we get up here to about the headlight, feels like it's getting pretty tight. Might have to lift up on the front. And start to just work this off. We're just going to try to continue around and try to get this off. So it's really tight right here. That's pretty normal. We'll have to try to just continue to kind of work it around until we get it to pop free. So I was kind of just looking around and kind of working this some more, and right here I kind of just grabbed and just carefully put some pressure on him. It was pretty tight, but put that straight pressure on it and this popped off. And now with that free, we should be able to get the whole fascia off. So we'll just continue to work this around. Before you pull your fascia all the way off, be careful because we are going to have some electrical wiring here on the passenger side. We'll disconnect that, push back on that red clip, down on the center of it, and that's going to release the wiring. So with this free, we can set it off to the side somewhere safe. With the fascia out of the way, we now need to remove our windshield washer reservoir. And up here in the engine compartment right there, we're gonna have a plastic push pin fastener. You take a trim tool or a flathead screwdriver will work too. But you're gonna pry up on the head of that fastener, get it up a little ways, then work the base out. Moving down where our washer fluid bottle is, we need to disconnect everything. So a couple of connectors. These are all going to work the same as the other ones we did. You know, you just push down on them and release them. Pull all this wiring out from the bottle itself. Make sure it's all separated. That one, it looks like you just have to take the tab and push up on it. That'll release that one. I'm just gonna try to tuck this out of the way, kinda. Get our lines pulled out. And I think what I'm gonna do is maybe grab a marker. Since these lines are pretty much the same in length, I wanna mark them. That way we can put them back in the same spot that they were before. That way we don't mix them up and have to come back and redo it. So I went ahead and just marked, you know, one line and one fitting there. And now we're going to unplug these. Have something to catch the fluid in ready or something to plug these up with. I actually just grabbed some of our bolts that we removed. They look like they're probably going to be the right size. But if these are too small, I happen to just grab some random bolts laying around that you can put in the line and plug it. So we'll get this ready here, and with these, I think I'm just going to pull them out like this. And that one's actually not leaking, so that's cool, but we'll still put a bolt in there. We'll go ahead and do this one next. Now we can remove this. So we're gonna have two 10mm nuts. Pull those off. And you should be able to kind of lift up and out. Well, actually, there's one more. There's going to be one more 10mm bolt right here. We'll pull that out, and now we should be able to kind of lift up and work our washer fluid reservoir out and set off to the side. So now if we look at this little shroud here, right underneath the bumper, you see that plastic kind of comes down. We're gonna cut that on each side. So I'm just using a pair of snips here to cut through it. So I got the other side cut already. And then if you look down right here, there's a clip, if you will. You can push up on that clip and pull back on the shroud. We should get this to pop out. Get this one free, the other side free. Now we can get this out of the way. So now, moving up to our bumper beam, we're gonna have to pull the bolts out of it. We're not gonna completely remove the beam though. It should be supported by a couple of other brackets that we have going on, but we do need to take these out on each side of it. So we're gonna have 4 15mm head bolts. So I already got the other side out, and as you can see, has a little bit of movement, so we'll just let it hang for the time being. Over here on the passenger side, we're gonna have the sensor we need to disconnect. So just like the others, pull back on this tab. And then this one's a little bit different. The best luck I have with these, take a small flathead and just kind of carefully pry up inside of there. A lot of times these are really tight and kind of difficult to get off, so. Kind of a different style here. It just never fails. I always want to kind of fight you a little bit, but this is what I was prying up on. And once that's pried up on, you're able to remove the sensor or remove the plug. Over here on the passenger side, if you're looking at the side of our vehicle, this oval opening, there's a couple holes in there. And the top hole, we're gonna need to enlarge that to the size listed in the instructions. I do suggest, since our intercooler piping and stuff is right behind there, I just took a block of wood, put it in there. That way when our bit goes through, we're not gonna drill into any of our hoses or anything like that. So definitely be conscious of that when you're doing this. With that said, I'm gonna take our bit. So this is what the hole is going to look like once you have it drilled out. So now underneath we have this cover here. We're going to remove the first 2 bolts on each side of it. They're 7mm. And we're just going to let this hang down. This will give us an opening here to make it a little easier to work here in a little while. Now at the next set of hands, we can take our base plate, and the holes in it are going to line up with our bumper beam holes there. And we're going to take that factory hardware, get it started. That way the base plate will support itself. You want to use some red Loctite on the threads for all the hardware that we're going to be using to secure the base plate. You can always grab some here at eTrailer, but that said, we'll get it lined up and get all of our bolts started. So what I like to do is just get all of them started by hand. They are kind of tight, so it makes it a little easier if you just grab the socket, and gives you a little more leverage when you're turning these in. With all of the hardware hand tight, we'll come back and snug it down. Then we'll grab a torque wrench and torque it all down to the amount specified in the instructions. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can grab one here at eTrailer. Or a lot of times you go to your local auto parts store, they'll have one available to rent. Now you can grab our side plates, and these are going to go in with this ramped side here facing towards the back of our vehicle. These two holes are going to line up with two holes in this part of the frame. And it's a little tight, it's going to be kind of tricky to see, but we'll do our best here. And when we're holding this up, you're going to take the 1/2-inch bolt, flat washer, split lock washer, and run these through. So you're going to push them all the way through. So take this, slide it roughly into position, line the holes up, and push these through. So now we can line up these holes on our side plate with those in our base plate. So a lot of times it's not going to just fall right into place. Sometimes what you have to do is kind of pry it into position. So I'm just using this pry bar deal here. Going to kind of hold that up. Then you're going to take these bolts, put on your Loctite, feed that through, and then once I let off of the pry bar here, we should be lined up on this one as well, or at least really close. So not quite there, but that's okay. What we'll do is get the nut started, this lock nut started on the one that's coming through. And now that it's holding itself, this one's so close you can probably come back with a socket and start to turn it and probably get it to come through. Yeah, I started just kind of applying a little bit of pressure and tightening this up. If it's super tight, you don't want to keep cranking, but a little bit of pressure, it's not going to damage the threads or anything. So this one's going pretty easy. Once we have enough thread showing, then we can come back and put on our nylon lock nut. And then once we get the other bolts started, or I'm sorry, the other nut started and kind of start to tighten everything, it should all kind of pull together and straighten itself out. So now for the mother bolts, over here on the driver's side, we have this wiring pack, and this literally just popped out. But it's gonna be really tricky to see me do this, so I'm going to do my best to explain it. In this opening here, this is where our bolts pass through. So what you're going to do is take one of these handle nuts, put a bend in it, put red Loctite on the threads, and you're going to line this up with the bolts that are coming through. You'll come back on the back side and turn that bolt to get it tightened up. So you want to get these going, and I try to tighten them up as much as I can by hand. Put some Loctite on there first. Tighten up as much as you can by hand. Once I have both of them going, I'll show you what it looks like. So I went ahead and got those nuts started, and while I was right there, I also tightened them down. I just used a 3/4 inch box wrench and just tightened down the heads of the bolt to kind of run everything in together snug. But now that that is done, we can come back to the bolts that we still have loose and get those tightened down. For these bolts, I'm just going to use a 9/16 box wrench and socket. Hold the nut from spinning and tighten down the bolt. Now that all those bolts are snug, you need to make sure to come back with the torque wrench and tighten all these down to the amount specified in the instructions as well. Since the bolts there in the back are pretty tight, it's going to be a little tricky to get a regular socket on there to torque them down. So you can always use a tool like this. It's a dog bone style, 3/4 inch in size. You could probably also use what's called the crow's foot. Essentially, it's just kind of a low profile type deal that can go on your ratchet there to allow you to kind of sneak that up into place and torque everything down. So may consider using something like this if you have it. Over here on the passenger side, this is how these turned out. A little easier to see, so I figured I'd show you. But once you have everything torqued, the remaining portion of the handle nuts, you can just take a pair of snips and trim those off. And while you're over here, if you remember that sensor that we unplugged, you can also just plug that right back in its original sensor, the opposite way that we removed it. So now we got to put on our safety cables, which I have done. I just took that, wrapped it around twice, this beam here, and then used the provided D-link to attach it to that hole on our base plate. Once that's tightened down, I like to just come back with a few zip ties, kind of zip tie everything up nice and tight. That way it's not going to, you know, bounce around a whole lot when we're driving down the road and make a rattle or anything like that. So I went ahead, reinstalled our washer fluid bottle and hooked everything back up the opposite way that we removed it. And now would be a great time to install any of your other flat towing components like wiring or a braking system. And I say that because with the front end part here, just makes it a lot easier to get to stuff, a lot easier to wire everything and so on. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And once I'm done with that, then we can come back and hold our fascia up and get it trimmed out and everything. That way it'll clear our base plate. If you're not installing those components or already have them on, just refer to your instructions on how to cut the fascia, trim it up, and simply reinstall it the opposite way. So now that we have everything wrapped up on the front, we can get our fascia trimmed out and put back on. So I used the picture and the instructions as a reference and just held this up in place and kind of marked out where we need to trim. In our case, since we have this ST model, this piece kind of runs right in the way. So we're gonna have to take a little material out, but what I'm gonna do is try to just kind of go piece by piece, and we can hold it back up there and see if we can kind of get around that. That way we can cut as little as possible out. But with that said, I'm gonna be using a little saw like this here. Honestly, with this one being pretty thick, you could probably use a jigsaw or a Dremel tool, whatever you have laying around more or less. So go ahead and start get cutting. So this is how everything turned out. I did have to cut quite a bit out of it. Tried to leave some pieces in there and it just was not cooperating. So sometimes it almost looks better just to get rid of it all as opposed to having a couple little pieces here and there that are all chopped up. So, you know, it don't look too bad actually. Once it's on the ground, you're really not going to be able to see it. But with that said, once you get it fit back into place, you can simply plug everything back in and re-secure your whole front fascia the opposite way that you removed it. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Blue Ox base plate kit on our 2022 Buick Encore GX ST.